Okay, so are you ready to dive into this story? It's like something right out of a 1970s movie.
Yeah, I think gas lines, disco, and that feeling that technology could fix anything.
We're talking about Geraldine Elizabeth Carmichael
Yeah.
and her invention, the Dale.
A three-wheeled car that was supposed to, like, change everything.
Change everything, huh?
That's the claim, anyway.
So was she a real visionary or just really good at taking advantage of, the situation back then?
That's what we're going to try to figure out.
Okay, so the 70s fuel crisis, that's a big part of this whole thing, right?
Oh, absolutely. People were waiting in these crazy long lines at gas stations, and prices were going through the roof.
Yeah, I think of the pictures. It's wild.
And that's where Carmichael shows up. She's like, hey, I've got this car that can get 70 miles to the gallon.
70 miles
Yeah.
on a gallon of gas.
And it'll only cost you under $2,000.
Come on. Was that even possible back then?
Well, that's the $1,000,000 question, or maybe the $2,000 question.
Right. Okay, so let's talk about Carmichael herself.
Well, her story's pretty complicated. Even her name, Geraldine Elizabeth Carmichael, was just one of many.
Wait, really?
Yeah, she was born Geraldine Michael. And get this, 4 marriages, 10 kids.
Wow. Okay, that's a lot to unpack.
And there's more. She even got in trouble with the law for counterfeiting back in 1961.
Counterfeiting. That's not good.
Yeah, it kind of makes you wonder if this was like a pattern with her, you know?
So maybe she was always a hustler even before the Dale.
It's possible, right? Or maybe life just kept pushing her in that direction.
I guess that's what we're trying to find out.
Yeah, digging into all this is going to be interesting.
Okay, so enough about her past. Let's talk about the Dale. Was this thing actually revolutionary or was it all just hype?
Well, the first design for the Dale, it actually came from a guy named Dale Cliff.
Makes sense.
And his prototype was really basic, just like tubing and a motorcycle engine.
Oh, puffy fancy.
But then Carmichael saw something in it, especially with all the gas problems back then.
Yeah, she saw a chance to be like a hero.
Exactly. She had this big vision, you know. She wanted the Dale to be the answer to America's gas woes.
Okay, I get it. But did she actually make good on those promises?
Yeah.
You know, a cheap, fuel-efficient car.
That's where things get a little fuzzy.
Fuzzy out.
Well, Carmichael started this company, the 20th Century Motor Car Corporation, and she was bragging about factories and hundreds of employees and millions of dollars in funding.
Sounds impressive.
But here's the thing. They only ever made a few prototype Dales.
A few.
And get this, only one of them could actually move on its own.
So she's promising this amazing car and she doesn't even have a working model.
It definitely raises some red flags, right?
Yeah, it's starting to sound more like a scam than a real attempt to change things.
That's one way to look at it. And there's more.
Yeah.
If you look at how she ran the company, well, let's just say there are some things that don't add up.
Like what?
For example, there's this article from the San Gabriel Valley Tribune from 1975.
Okay.
And they looked into the company's money stuff, and they found that a lot of it was cash transactions.
Cash. Why would a car company do that?
It's pretty unusual, right?
Seems like she was trying to hide something.
Maybe. And, you know, when you think about her past with the counterfeiting and all the different names she used.
It makes you wonder what she was really up to.
Exactly. Was she really trying to build a company, or was this all just a big scheme?
I guess we'll have to keep digging to find out more.
Yeah, it really makes you think. Was she a true believer in her own ideas, or was it all about staying out of trouble?
It's tough to say, but one thing's for sure. Carmichael knew how to work the media. Like she was a master at getting attention.
Oh, yeah. She had that whole larger-than-life persona.
I remember seeing those pictures of her posing like Wonder Woman.
Exactly. And she was always saying stuff like, I don't want to sound like an egomaniac, but I'm a genius.
Okay, maybe a little egomaniacal.
Yeah.
But for a while, it worked, right? Everyone was talking about the Dale, like it was the car of the future.
It was all over the newspapers and TV, but the more famous she got, the more people started looking into her.
And that's when things started to fall apart.
Pretty much. The FBI got a tip from one of her employees, someone who wasn't too happy with her.
What did they say?
Well, they gave the FBI her fingerprints. And guess what?
They matched the ones from that counterfeiting case.
Bingo. All those past problems were catching up to her.
So what did she do?
Well, there's this crazy story about her shooting at a Dale door.
Shooting at it. Why?
She wanted to prove that it was made of bulletproof plastic.
Bulletproof plastic.
Yeah, I know it sounds nuts. It's even mentioned in this article about the HBO documentary, The Lady in the Dale.
Okay, so she's trying to pull a fast one.
Well, not everyone buys it. One of her former coworkers said it never happened.
So maybe it was just another lie.
Could be. But it makes you wonder about the people who worked for her. Did they believe in the Dale, or were they just caught up in all the hype?
It's a good question. I mean, some of them must have really thought they were part of something big.
Right, like they were going to change the world. But how could they ignore all the shady stuff?
You're talking about the cash transactions and the fact that she was selling a car that didn't even exist.
Exactly. Some people definitely had their doubts.
Did anyone say anything?
Yeah, actually, in that same article from Salon, one of her coworkers talks about the moment they realized it was all a fake.
What happened?
Well, Carmichael was telling reporters about this amazing bulletproof plastic.
The same stuff she shot at,
Yep. And this coworker even started to believe her.
even though they had never seen any proof.
Right. But then to prove her point, Carmichael took a gun and shot at a deal door. The door shattered into pieces. Total bust.
Wow, so she was really desperate to keep the illusion going.
It seems like it. Which brings us back to the big question. Is she a visionary or a con artist? Was she really trying to make the world a better place? Or was she just thinking about herself?
It's hard to say for sure. I mean, she was a complicated person.
Yeah. And there's another layer to all of this. We can't forget about Carmichael being a transgender woman back in the 70s.
That's right. Things were a lot different back then.
It makes you wonder how much of the media attention and all the scrutiny she got was because she was trans.
Yeah, I mean, there's a long history of transgender people being treated unfairly, like criminals or freaks.
Exactly. And it's mentioned in this article from Time.
So maybe we can't just look at Carmichael's story on its own. We have to think about the time period and all the prejudice she probably faced.
Absolutely. It makes you think how her story might have been different if people had been more accepting.
Would she have felt the need to lie and pretend? Would she have been able to just be herself?
Yeah, it's an interesting thought. But let's get back to the main question, grifter or gifted. After looking at all this research, do you have a better idea of who Geraldine Elizabeth Carmichael really was?
Honestly, I'm still not sure. And I think that's part of what makes her story so fascinating. She was always changing her story, changing who she was. It's hard to know what was real and what was made up.
So she's still an enigma.
Yeah, in a lot of ways. But even if we don't have all the answers, I think we can learn a lot from her story. Yeah, it's like she had all these amazing ideas, but then she turned around and lied to everyone. It's hard to figure out what she really wanted.
Maybe we'll never know for sure, but that's kind of the point of all this research, you know? We don't always get clear-cut answers, but it makes you think about human nature and all its complications.
So if we can't say for sure if Carmichael was a con artist or a visionary, what can we learn from all of this?
I think her story shows us that just because someone is charismatic and seems really sure of themselves doesn't mean they're telling the truth.
Yeah, you can't just take people at their word. You have to look at what they actually do.
Exactly. And Carmichael's actions didn't always match up with all her big promises.
It's like they say, actions speak louder than words.
Right. And I think another takeaway is that we have to be careful about putting people on a pedestal.
You mean like how people got so caught up in the idea of the Dale that they ignored all the warning signs?
Exactly. They wanted a solution to the fuel crisis so badly that they were willing to believe anything.
And that's something we still see today, right? People falling for hype and empty promises.
Oh, definitely. We're constantly bombarded with information, and it's easy to get swept up in it all.
So we need to be more skeptical, more critical of what we see and hear.
Absolutely. We can't just accept things at face value. We have to do our own research and think for ourselves.
I think Carmichael's story also shows us that history isn't always simple. You know, it's not always good guys versus bad guys.
Yeah, people are complex. They have different motivations, and sometimes they do things that are hard to understand.
Like Carmichael, she was both brilliant and dishonest, ambitious and reckless.
It's tempting to want to put people into neat little categories, but real life is messy.
So maybe the real question isn't grifter or gifted,
Yeah.
but what can we learn from Carmichael's complicated story?
It challenges us to question our assumptions, to think critically, and to be open to the fact that people are full of contradictions.
Well said. I think that's a great way to wrap up our deep dive on Geraldine Elizabeth Carmichael and the Dale, a story full of ambition, deception, and the never-ending pursuit of the American dream.
It's a story that makes you think, and that's what we're all about.
So until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep digging deeper into the stories that shape our world.
We'll see you then.